The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Morning, everybody. I'm Scott Price. I'm Executive Director with the South Carolina School Boards Association. We're very happy this morning to offer you this very important Lunch and Learn webinar focusing on the new South Carolina school report cards. These report cards are scheduled to be released to the public statewide on November 15th, 2018, just a few short weeks away. Every school will receive a rating or a grade for various factors. It's very important that you as school board members know about these report cards before their release. Joining us this morning are Melanie Barton, Executive Director of the South Carolina Education Oversight Committee, and John Payne, Deputy Superintendent for the Office of Innovation and Effectiveness at the South Carolina Department of Education. And thank you all for being here this morning.
Thank you.
We are recording this webinar and we'll provide a link on our website for you all to view as soon as possible after the presentation today. Please submit your questions during the webinar by typing them into the box on your screen. And again, I want to thank you for joining us for this very informative and very important webinar this morning. And I'm going to turn it over to Melanie and John right now and try to extradite myself from the scene. Thank you all for being here this morning.
Thanks so much for having us. We're going to do this, it's like a tag team show, so we're going to go through the slides and tag team and talk to you about the South Carolina School Accountability System that are the new report cards. So this is a familiar face to you, the South Carolina Profile of the Graduate. This is state law. So state law requires that the accountability system that we use to evaluate schools and performance of students must match the profile of the graduate. And as you look at those three indicators, world-class knowledge, world-class skills, and life and career characteristics, we've done a really good job on that first column, the world-class knowledge. Those are typically your state assessments, end of course, as well as the grades 3 through 8 and your career readiness assessment in high school. Where we have some challenges is measuring what creativity and innovation really mean, how do you define integrity and how do you measure it? So this is the part of the profile that we're working on, changing it and learning how to measure the profile of the graduate. So this is the most important slide I think that you need to really understand is why are the report cards different from the past. In the past, we had two accountability systems working against one another. We had state accountability and we had the federal. You remember the old No Child Left Behind and adequate yearly progress that was followed by the school grades under the ESSA waiver, A, B, C, D, and F. So what the General Assembly decided in state law was that we're going to merge the state and federal accountabilities into one central reporting requirement. So under state law, schools, not districts, are receiving overall ratings this November. The overall ratings have to be based on a 100-point scale. Each indicator that we're using to measure that performance also must have a rating. And all ratings have to be excellent, good, average, below average, and unsatisfactory. We've gone back to unsatisfactory. It used to be at risk. All the report cards are going to be online now with a lot of data that you as a school board member can access and look at the performance of schools in your district. And there's a lot of other data that are going to be reported by law or proviso on these report cards. So it's just not going to be assessment data or the results of the student engagement survey. A lot of data are going to be on those report cards. Under federal law, we have to measure academic achievement, but academic achievement by federal law must only be reading and math, your English language arts scores and your math scores. Nothing else can be included in academic achievement. So that's why you're going to see later on that we included science and social studies assessments under a different indicator. For the first time, federal law requires that we have to track and measure how well students who are learning English, those non-native speakers, how well are they learning the English language? And that's called English language proficiency. It is required by the feds. Graduation rate is required as well. We've been doing that in South Carolina for many years. Academic progress, or the growth of students from one year to the next, is left to states' discretion on how they measure that if they include it, and we in South Carolina are including it. And for the first time, states have to have an indicator for school quality and student success, and we're going to talk more about that. And finally, this is really important, all the data that are used to evaluate schools and to rate schools must report the subperformance on all indicators. For example, we have to report by race and ethnicity, gender, disabilities, all of those subgroup performances you as a school board member will be able to see. It's going to be, again, the feds wanted transparency, and most importantly, all students included in the accountability system. So when you look at the profile of the South Carolina graduate, the federal law, merging the two, this is what it looks like, to be perfectly honest. It's like putting a round block into a square hole, and it is very difficult for us merging these two systems. So this is the first try at that. I will say this fall will be the first attempt at trying to make these two systems fit together and make sense, most importantly, to the public, to educators, to community leaders on how well our schools are doing. So again, looking at the ESSA federal requirements. So a lot of times when people ask me questions about the accountability system, 9 times out of 10 I have to say it's because of the federal requirements. So again, looking at this chart, elementary, middle, and high schools, there are certain indicators that must be reported by each category level. Academic progress, as you'll notice, is left up to the states, but everything else is required by federal law. Now, you as a school board member may be asking, well, why can't we measure other things on the accountability system? And we are working to figure out how to measure those other indicators. But as we go down that path, we have to be real careful. All indicators must be applicable to all schools, regardless of socioeconomic, regardless of if they're rural, urban. So we have to make these measures equitable to all school districts. They have to meaningfully differentiate between schools, which means if all schools get a high rating on an indicator, then that indicator is not doing what it's supposed to do to disaggregate how well schools are doing relative to one another. Again, student groups performance has to be disaggregated. It's really important. And all the indicators have to be valid and reliable, which means the indicator that we use to evaluate schools must actually do that, measure what it's purported to measure, and that has to be accounted for.
So Melanie mentioned just a few minutes ago that by state law we are required to have a 100-point scale, and we're required to have these various indicators. So the slide that you see before you now is how we as a state have taken these indicators and put them into a 100-point scale. You see that the points are distributed for elementary and middle and then high school. Within those grade bands, they're further divided in terms of those schools that have students working towards English language proficiency and those that do not have students working towards English language proficiency. We're using an N size or a group size of 20 to determine whether or not they get which rating that they get. So in other words, if a school has 20 students who are working on their English language proficiency or more, they will get the with ELP measure. If the school does not have the 20 or has 20 or fewer, they get the without ELP metric. So what you'll see is for academic achievement, that's our English language, arts, and math. At the elementary and middle, that's going to be our SC Ready. At the high school, that's our end of course assessments. You see the point distribution. So 40 points at the elementary and middle without ELP, or 35 if they do have those students working towards English language proficiency. At the high school, that is 30 and 25 points. Now, it's important to note here that one of the things that we're excited about with our new accountability system is all the multiple measures that we're including in how we're holding schools accountable. Historically, schools and districts have been held accountable typically for statewide assessment results, but as you'll see as we go through this, we're looking at a lot more metrics or indicators in terms of how we're holding schools accountable. The second indicator for points is the preparing for success, and that's our results in science and social studies at the elementary and middle, and at the high school, biology and U.S. history constitution. And you see that's 10 points across the board. At the elementary and middle school, we have a student growth value added model that is worth 40 points, or 35 again if you have an ELP. The Those points are distributed by 20 points for the growth of all students and 20 points for the growth of the lowest performing 20% of students. That is not a measure that we have at the high school. At the next level is a school quality, which we'll talk more about, and that's a student engagement survey worth 10 points. English language proficiency, if they have those students that are working towards English language proficiency, they get 10 points. Otherwise, that does not apply. At the high school level, we have graduation rates and college and career ready metrics. If you look at these point distributions at the elementary, middle, and at the high school level, you'll see that they total 100 points, which is, again, required in state law. Melanie also mentioned about the school ratings. And so, again, schools, not districts, will receive an overall rating, and then each of those indicators we just looked at will also have a rating as well. So this language is specified in state law. So an excellent school is defined as a school that's performance substantially exceeds the criteria to ensure all students meet the profile. A good means it exceeds the criteria, average it meets it, below is in jeopardy, and unsatisfactory is that it fails to meet the criteria. Again, this is specified in state law.
So the big question, so how are we going to determine the overall school ratings? What will my schools look like? So when we were designing the accountability system last December, putting this new system together, we didn't have any data to really be able to analyze performance over time with all these new indicators. So what the EOC, and this was a decision made by the EOC, we looked at the 2015 NAEP performance of our students in South Carolina. We didn't have the 2017 when these percentages were made. So we looked at that, and in South Carolina, in grades 4 and 8, in English language arts and math, between 25 to 37% of our students were scoring proficient and advanced, meaning they're meeting the standards to be college and career ready based on NAEP. This is relative. This is the only way that South Carolina has to compare itself to other states. Basic, which is just slightly below grade level, was 31 to 44%, and below basic, 21 to 35%. So looking at where our students were nationally, the EOC said we're going to set percentages for year one only that says that 15% of our schools will be excellent and 20% good. That relates to almost the midpoint between 25 and 37%. The EOC made the decision, if our students are scoring at this level, then it translates that our schools cannot be performing at a higher or lower level. So 35%, when you combine excellent and good, match the proficient and advanced. At the bottom level, we went with 20% below average and 10% unsatisfactory, again to be in the midpoint of the range in that regard. So the EOC committed to keep the percentages in the overall ratings this way for the first year, and while the percentages will hopefully change and improve, the cut points that define what an excellent school is will not change. For example, it would not surprise me, we have not run the data yet because we're still waiting on the validating a lot of the data and some submissions from districts that are kind of late in the game. But it would not surprise me if an excellent school, say, is 60 points out of 100 to be excellent. We would keep that threshold of 60 for at least 5 years, hoping that we will see gains in the number of schools who hit that level. The concern will be if the below average and unsatisfactory grow from 30% to higher, then we would have to really evaluate that, because that's telling us that either the system that we've created is not meeting the expectations, or we need to do something as far as resources for those schools that are at that lower level. So again, the percentages will be the same for year one, but they'll change in years 2 and beyond. The cut points will not.
So once we identify the schools in that unsatisfactory level, one of the things that federal law requires is that we, and Melanie mentioned, we have to meaningfully differentiate with that. So what does that look like? So you're probably familiar with terms like priority schools and focus schools. We are continuing our priority school, which is a state designation. So those schools in the bottom 10%, those scoring unsatisfactory, in the bottom 10% of all of our schools will be designated as priority schools. CSI stands for Comprehensive Support and Intervention, are going to be those schools that are Title I schools that are in the bottom 5% of our weighted index or point index, or schools or high schools that have a graduation rate of less than 70%. And then you see all other schools constitute the 90%. Those will continue to get support, targeted support in various areas from the department, but those specific schools that we're going to get more intensive service and support from the department will be those priority and CSI schools. So let's break that down in terms of what these school improvement designations are going to look like. So we have the ranking of all schools using our weighted point index, that 100-point scale. We'll identify the bottom 10% of all schools, and those will be our priority schools. Those can be either Title I or not Title I schools. So again, priority schools will be all schools. The bottom 5% of our Title I schools will be designated as needing comprehensive support and intervention. These designations will be done every 3 years, except for the first cycle, which will be 2. Priority schools will have access to universal supports and professional development. It may have access to some funds, but because we're expecting more schools than we have had historically in the bottom 5%, those funds, state and federal funds, will be allocated primarily for those comprehensive support and intervention schools or improvement schools in that bottom 5%. We also have, as a way of differentiating it, something called targeted support and improvement schools. And think of these as how we are looking at subgroup performance. Focus schools, we could also call them focus schools as well. In the TSI, the targeted support, again, that's for our subgroups, there are 2 different kinds of ways. The first is you have a low-performing subgroup focus school, which is the where we're comparing subgroups, each of those subgroups, so race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, disability status, and seeing are the subgroups performing below the top CSI school. So we identify the CSI school, and whatever that top 5, the one at the very top of that 5%, we look at subgroups and to determine are they, for each of the indicators, performing below that threshold. If that's the case, then they will be designated as a low-performing subgroup. Consistently underperforming subgroups is the other kind of subgroup or the other kind of TSI school, and that will be for those schools that are continuing to stay on the list or consistently underperform below the priority school designation year over year. We will not be identifying any of this type of school this first year, but we will be in the coming years. So what does this mean in terms of the support your schools may get? CSI and TSI schools will get both state and federal technical assistance funds. They will have access to a transformational coach and will work through all of the many resources that we've developed to help address the issues that have caused the school to be in the bottom 5% or to cause that subgroup to be in the low areas across all of the metrics. Again, these will be 3-year designations, and we hope over time to see those metrics and see those points increase as we continue to work addressing either the all students in the CSI group or those particular subgroups for the TSI schools. We will be, as Melanie mentioned, we are in the process now of validating and cleaning all the data and making sure our calculations are all accurate. Our next steps include informally reaching out and then a formal notification to go to school districts on or around the release of the report card, notifying them of whether or not their district has any CSI or TSI schools. From that, we will begin working with the school district and providing professional development and some technical assistance centers to begin the work of working intensively to address the areas that caused the CSI or TSI designations. One of the things that we're looking at, so as Melanie mentioned also earlier, schools, not districts, will receive ratings, and we will have report cards for all elementary, middle, and high schools. We do know, however, that we have several schools that have unusual grade spans, and so we have determined a way of determining or identifying what kind of report card a school will get based on their specific grade spans. It's important to note that for this first year, primary schools will not receive a rating. They will receive the designation status of their feeder elementary school. So if their feeder elementary school is a CSI school, the primary school also will be. But this first year, there'll be no ratings for primary schools. Elementary schools, depending upon the grade span, could get an elementary. So for example, if it's an elementary school that it includes both PK and 2 through 5, they'll get an elementary school report card. Middle schools the typical grades. Outside of that, if they have unusual grades, they may also. So a PK through 7, for example, would also get a middle school report card. A high school, we have some high schools some schools in the state that are PK through 12, and so they would also get a high school report card as well. So what we've attempted to do is to identify what are all the possible grade spans of our schools throughout the state, and then identify what kind of report card that they will receive. So what is it going to look like? Melanie mentioned that report cards will be online. When you first go to the report card platform, you'll have an option of picking a district and then picking some schools within that district or a school. There's also the option of comparing schools or districts to one another. When you select your school, the first thing that you will see is this screen that's before you now. So what you'll notice in the top left corner is the designation: excellent, good, average. In this example here, you'll see average. Please note that if you can notice any of the data, these are just fictional data. In this make-believe example, we said 45 constitutes an average school, and so average is the designation. 45 would be the representation of how many points out of 100 that particular elementary school received. You'll see directly below it a column of information. That information will contain the point spread to determine what constitutes an excellent school, a good school, an average school, and below. Beside the designation, the average, and the points out of 100, or the overall points, you'll see the contact information, and to the right at the top you'll see the narrative submitted by the district on information about. Below that, you will see a series of icons, and by clicking on these icons, it will take you into a deeper dive. At the elementary level, it's going to be those indicators that are specific to the elementary or middle school, so academic achievement, preparing for success, English language proficiency, and so forth. At the high school, it will look a little different. The only difference is it will include the graduation and college career ready metric as opposed to the student growth, and so you'll see a little different icon. Again, by clicking on any of those icons, it will take you into a deeper dive of that specific information that we'll show you here very soon. At the district level will have all of the icons. The only difference there is that there will not be an overall rating because districts do not get a rating. So at the district, it will look like this, but just have access to all the icons rolled up at the district level. And this is another visualization of those various icons. We will have, and we'll go into momentarily, some additional measures that are not part of our rating system, but either because of federal or state law are required to be included. And those include things such as school quality, classroom environment, student safety, and financial data. So let's dive into each of the measures and indicators in our accountability model.
Thanks, John. So we're going to start off with academic achievement, and I'm going to give you the 30,000-foot level. There's a big accountability manual online at both the Department of Ed and the EOC that goes into the calculations that go through this to come up with the overall ratings. But I'm going to give you, as a school board member, the big picture on why this matters to you. So the first is academic achievement, and the purpose of that indicator is to determine how students in a school are meeting state standards in English language arts and math. Reading, writing, and math. So what it means is overall, how well are the students doing in my school? At the elementary middle level, that's based entirely on your SC Ready scores in grades 3 through 8. And at the high school right now, it's the end of course scores in Algebra 1 and English 1. In both of those, this is a change from the past, and you need to be aware, all of the alternative assessments for students are counted in these indicators. In the past, under the old state system, those were rolled up into the district rating. Because we don't have district ratings, we're going to be reporting and counting those students at the academic achievement level, at the school level, so that is a change. And it's, again, to conform to federal law as well. So this is the data that's going to be on there. Schools are going to get, I call it credit, for if a student is scoring approaches, 1 point, 2 points for meets, and 3 points for exceeds. So the way we've set up the system, the more the students progress at a higher level, the school earns more points. Same way under Algebra 1 and English 1. A's get 4 points, B's 3s, and on down. So the impetus should be getting more students scoring at the higher achievement levels. Also, what's going to be on this indicator is information about the percentage of time that both students and teachers are present at a school. That may be something that the school board members want to look at, because if the students and the teachers have a chronic absenteeism at their school, then there's an issue with the learning going on, because if the students aren't there, they can't learn, as well as having a teacher in there, it makes a huge difference. So the other thing that you just wanted to know, so at the elementary and middle levels, we're looking at students that were enrolled in your schools on the 45th day and on the 160th day, because we don't want to penalize schools where a student may have only been there a few weeks out of the year, but it's really from the 45th to the 160th at elementary and middle. And at the high school, this is a big change that I want to really emphasize. We're looking at the 4-year graduation cohort. Those students who should be graduating as seniors, that's who we're going to count with their end of course scores, because the federal government requires that every high school student must take an English, math, and science assessment during their high school experience. The ones that we're using right now are English 1 and Algebra 1. You may be saying, well, in my district, a lot of students take it as 7th graders. Well, those scores are going to follow the students to the high school and be counted there. So that's a big change. Until we have other assessments, and of course the state's looking at going with Algebra 2 and English 2, we have to use the English 1 and Algebra 1 right now. If the school tests less than 95% of the eligible students who should have taken the exam, it's important to note that their school's rating will be reduced by 1 rating. So if they were supposed to be a good school, but they only tested 90%, then they're going to be dropped down to an average school. Same way at the high school. We have to have 95% of the students tested. It's a federal requirement because we want all students to be included. It's really an incentive to get those students to know where they stand academically.
So what does this look like on the report card? Again, going from the main launch page, if you click on the academic achievement metric, you will see this page before you come up. So this is an example at the elementary or middle level. So where you would see at the very top, academic achievement, overall performance. Then the data presented in terms of the percentage at the school level, the district level, and the state. Then it's broken down by mathematics at the school level, the district level, and the state. So you can compare how is our school doing in comparison to the district and in comparison to the state. You'll notice on the right side little boxes that are detailed boxes. By clicking on those boxes, it will take you into a deeper dive of those data. So if you click on the detail box, it would take you in on, let's say, SC Ready and English Language Arts. It would show you what is the percentage of exceeding, meeting, approaching, or not meeting expectations on our SC Ready results. Mathematics, the same thing. At the high school level, it would be very similar, only it would be distributed by Algebra 1 and English 1. What you'll notice on the report cards as well, again, as Melanie mentioned, is additional information required to be reported but not used in the rating. And so here in a chart form at the bottom is the prime instructional time, which is an additional element reported on this page.
The next indicator is student progress, or what we tend to call student growth. It's only for the elementary and middle schools, and the goal of this indicator is to determine how students are growing or improving academically in English, language arts, and math, and how the lowest performing 20% of students in a school are growing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about value added because it is in state law that we must use a value added model. So when the General Assembly was debating whether to put this in law, the discussion was, well, what did we do in the past and what could we do now? So there were two ideas that they were looking at. One was the old system where we gave schools credit for moving students from does not meet to meets. So you would get a point because you moved the student from one performance level to another. That was the old system. This system is one that takes into account the initial starting point of children. So children who had a score, I'm just doing an example, of 100 on the ELA, they're compared to all other students who had a 100 to start out in 16, 17. How well did they improve to 17, 18? So it measures the value added or the educational achievement that that student has. So by using the initial score of 100, that takes into poverty, because that takes into account the poverty that the student had that impacted their initial score. So what we are hoping to see when we have all the value-added scores out there is that this is an indicator that takes into account poverty. So schools with high levels of poverty, low initial achievement under a value-added model should be able to measure significant growth of those students. And as you'll notice in the point system, academic achievement and student progress are equally counted. It was a really important emphasis for both the State Department and the EOC to value absolute achievement as importantly as the growth, because the only way we're going to move schools up, and especially moving students up, is to have a big emphasis on growth, which is another reason for the bottom 20%. As you know, and I know you've seen your data in your district, we do have a gap between historically underachieving students and all other students, and we have got to close that gap. So the emphasis on the 20% of moving the bottom 20% up, not lowering the top, but moving the bottom 20% up, is to really focus on closing that gap. So I know you're going to have lots of questions on your value-added scores. I know your district will do a good job of explaining that, but the real emphasis for you as a member is now we're going to measure growth relative to where every student started in 1 year. And hopefully we can learn from schools that have high value-added scores, what are they doing differently in curriculum, in support for those students, and we can learn from our peers.
So what does this look like on the report card? Again, if you go from the main page and click the student progress icon, you will be taken to this page that shows you student progress. At the very top is a bar that will show you the overall points earned for this particular metric, and then below that you'll see the points earned for all students and then the points earned for the lowest 20% of performing students. Additional information about student growth is charted below that. And then you'll notice the detail icons on the right-hand side in the little squares. Now, if you click these detail icons, it will take you off the report card platform to a site, a website produced by the vendor that we are using in this particular metric, where you will have additional data and information. One of the things I also wanted to point out as you're looking at these individual metrics, if you see the arrow in the little circle on the left-hand side, below that will be the points earned out for this particular metric at that specific school. And then below that, just as in the main launch page, you'll see the overall ratings and what constitutes for this metric good, excellent, unsatisfactory, and so forth.
On the next indicator, it's preparing for success. And again, we had to create this indicator to capture those scores on social studies and science because the U.S. Department of Ed would not allow us to use those in academic achievement. So what we're doing here is very similar to the academic achievement. We're measuring test score results on SC Ready, science in grades 4, 6, and 8, and social studies grades 5 and 7, again including alternate assessments where available. And at the high school, it's biology and U.S. history and the Constitution. I will tell you, based on our state results, we need to use these scores because they show a broader view of our curriculum. We've got national praise for including these in our indicator. The one test that is not required by state law, because we get a lot of questions, is the social studies. It is not required by federal law. It is required by state law, but that's a big part of the system. So same thing we are including. I want to really focus now on what is reported but not factored into the rating on these, so that you as a school board member need to know. On the elementary school report cards, the number and percentages of students entering kindergarten ready to learn will be reported. So these are the scores from the kindergarten readiness assessment that was administered last year in 2017-18 to your entering kindergarten students. This is something that was a big emphasis of the governor's office to really start focusing on early childhood. We want to be able to know where your children came into the system, how ready were they. So you will see that information displayed on all the domains, their physical readiness, English language learning, their readiness, as well as math and social and emotional. Also on the elementary schools, districts have self-reported the percentage of second graders on track for third grade success in reading and math. Again, this is self-reported because the General Assembly is still looking at the Read to Succeed law and helping districts to understand third grade reading starts way before third grade. It starts in kindergarten, first and second. So we want to start measuring and determining how well our students are doing in these indicators. And at the high school level, the percentage of students passing the civics test will be reported only. Again, everything you see on this screen will be reported, but it's information that you as a school board member could use and to really focus on those K through 3 years that aren't counted in the report card.
So as you dive into this particular metric, it's going to look very similar to the academic achievement metric in ELA and mathematics. So you will see for science and social studies broken out individually how the school is performing at the school level compared to the district level, also compared to the state level. Just as with the academic achievement metric, if you click on the square icon, the detail icon on the right-hand side, it will take you into a deeper dive. So at the high school level, it will give you the distribution of grades from A, B, C, D, and F for science or for biology, and then the same for U.S. history and Constitution. So this looks very similar. As Melanie mentioned, there's additional information that is presented on this page with respect to the results from the kindergarten readiness assessment, as well as the self-reported data in terms of the number of second graders who were on track to be ready in third grade in both ELA, or in reading, and in mathematics. Those values are identified at the school level, the district level, and then at the state level. So it gives you an opportunity to compare how is this school performing in relation to our district and in relation to students at the state level.
Now this is one of those metrics that, again, South Carolina devised for the high school level to measure what I think is probably the most important indicator for the whole system, the public ed system. Are students who graduate with a high school diploma in South Carolina college or career ready? This indicator will be driving a lot of policy, hopefully at your local level as well as the state level. So students, again, only students who graduated and earned a regular high school diploma will be counted in this indicator. It's students that earned a diploma from June 16th of 2017 to June 15th of 2018, so we could capture the summer graduations of students. There are multiple ways to meet this indicator. So what does it mean to be college ready? Right now it means a student must meet one of the following, just one. Composite score of 20 or higher on the SAT, a 1020 or higher on the SAT, scores a 3 or higher on an advanced placement or AP exam, scores a 4 or higher on an international baccalaureate assessment, which are only the higher learning exams that count towards college credit, and completes at least 6 credit hours in dual enrollment courses with a grade of C or higher. So I want you to really think about those indicators. Those are, again, based on either coursework that the student has accomplished or on an ACT or SAT or AP or IB exam. A student can also be college or career ready if they meet one of the following: is a CTE completer and earns a national or industry credential, earns a silver, gold, or platinum on the National Career Readiness Certificate, earns a scale score of 31 on the ASVAB, which is to get into the military, or successfully completes a state-approved work-based learning program. Those are the criteria that a student will be able to check off. This is the first time that we've collected this level of detail on students. These are individual student data that we will be looking at how well they perform on these indicators. From the beginning, the EOC said we will look at this very carefully because we really want to identify students who meet these criteria, especially the career ready. We want to make sure that the student's individual graduation plan matches with the certifications that they received, matches with what the student really wants to succeed in life. So be very careful when you get these results back from your own district to look at where do students how did they meet college or career readiness on this indicator, and what does that say about how we got to that point? Because we also want to make sure that students are both college and career ready, because students change their mind. They may decide at the last hour, no, I really want to go to my 2-year technical college and earn this credential or this 2-year degree, associate degree. They need to be prepared for that next step. So it's how to give students more choices and opportunity and access. What's also going to be reported on this, and this is really important, not factored in but reported, are all the data that you see at the bottom. CTE enrollment, dual enrollment credit in your district, average SAT and ACTs for your graduating seniors, scholarship information. I know that's an important one for your institutions. What we're hoping to collect going forward is information that will tell you how successful your graduates were in college or career. That's the next step in this pipeline, is getting a longitudinal data system that we can say from X high school in South Carolina, how well did they do? How well did they do that first year at their local community college or at USC or Clemson or Coastal Carolina? How well did they perform? Because that's the ultimate indicator of how we're doing as a system. I'm going to let you finish, then we'll answer this question.
So how does this look? Again, as Melanie indicated, there's one of 9 ways that a student can be college or career ready. And for the purposes of the measure, we're looking here at how many students who graduated met one of or more, ideally one or more of those particular metrics. So on this particular metric web page, you will see again the overall points and the rating on the left-hand upper side. You will then see the percentage of students who were college or career ready listed as the first, because that's what we're measuring. Underneath that, you will see the percentage of students who are college and career ready, because that's equally important to give students, as we certainly are committed to, all the options that may be preparing them for success beyond the high school. Under that, it's going to be the percentage of diploma earners who are college ready, and last but not least is going to be those who are the percentage of students who are career ready. Again, by clicking on the icons, it's going to take you into a little bit deeper dive in terms of what those metrics look like. As you scroll down this particular web page, you will see some additional information that Melanie talked about, the life scholarships, the other information that's going to be presented for your information, but not used in the rating of this particular metric. And then scrolling on down, you'll see that information will be displayed in a chart format below for you to review.
And John, we had a question about science and social studies and civics being reported but not rated. So we just want to clarify. Science and social study assessment results will be rated at 10 points out of the 100 for both the elementary, middle, or high. So the results on SC Ready and SC Pass for science and social studies do count. They receive a rating. The civics test is only reported. So that's the only one. But any of the state assessments that are required by law are counted and are rated with an overall rating.
Okay.
All right. The next one is English language learners. So for districts that have a high population of students who are non-native English speaking, you do have to report, and you will be rated on how well your students are meeting growth targets to learn the English language. And these growth targets were set actually by the English language coordinators, our ESOL coordinators in our state. So the ratings were set. It's about how well students can speak, read, write the English language. So all of that is included. ETSA requires that we have to disaggregate that information on the report cards. So just so that you understand, there's two different, and I don't want to get too technical, but there are two different EL populations. They're the English language learners, that includes all students for whom English is not their native language. They will be reported in subgroup. But the ones who count in this metric are all those students who have not yet learned the English language proficiently. So we will be actually grading schools on this. I will tell you up front, this is an area where our middle and high schools are probably going to struggle the hardest in their ratings. As you probably know, it's a lot easier to learn a foreign language, and for these students, learning English is a foreign language. It's a lot easier to learn it in the elementary schools. Once adolescence hits, they've been taking the courses for a while, they struggle. But this is an area where we may need extra resources for schools to help with this. I know you're having a hard time getting those teachers for these students, and that's a challenge as well in the districts. So again, as you look at this chart, at the very bottom, and this was just determined a couple of weeks ago, any school that has 80 to 100% of its students who are meeting their proficiency targets, they have to become English language proficient within 5 years of being in our schools. They're rated as excellent. Good, 60 to 79.9, and all the way down. Any school where less than 20% of the students did not meet their proficiency targets, they're going to be an unsatisfactory school.
So what does this particular metric look like? You will see at the school, the district, and the state level, the percent of the EL students who are meeting that progress or meeting the progress towards their proficiency targets. So again, it's that 5 years, and we have targets for each of those years depending upon when they come into the system, and determine are they meeting those progress or proficiency targets every year. That information is presented at the school level, at the district level, and at the state level. Now, it's important to note that if a school does not have the population or enough students in this metric, if they don't have if they have less than 20 students, then there will not be any information. This particular metric will not be rated. It's only if those schools that have 20 or more students working towards proficiency that will be counted in this. Again, on the right-hand top side, you'll see the overall rating and the possible points earned for this for the particular school. Again, only if they have sufficient numbers of students working towards proficiency. One of the things that we're really excited about this metric is the number of resources that are available for parents and community members and you to access. And so you'll see a number of links below these data that will take you to external websites that will present information on what is accountability. There are resources for individuals to learn who are not native English speakers, to learn more about what is this accountability, to learn more about the access assessment that's given to measure proficiency, and other guides for parents. So we're really excited about some of the resources, the additional links that we have available in this metric.
Good. And then the next one, of course, is graduation rate, and you're very familiar with this. This is the on-time graduation rate that measures how well our school is doing in graduating students in 4 years or less. So it's the percentage of students who enter the high school in 9th grade and graduate in at least 4 years. We tried several years ago looking at a 5-year graduation cohort because we know that not all students progress at the same level, or that they come in the 9th grade significantly below grade level. The graduation rate didn't really change much, to be honest. It was very minor fluctuation. So we stuck with the on-time graduation rate. So that's what's going to be counted in our report card. And as you know, we no longer have a high school exit exam. So this is just the graduation rate based on passing the 24 units to graduate. What will also be reported but not factored into the rating are the dropout rates at your high schools, as well as the dropout recovery rates where students re-enroll. So it's a way to capture both ends of this metric. So you're looking at the dropout recovery, and for each of the schools.
So this data will be presented in terms of the on-time graduation rate at the school, the district, and the state level. Again, the detail icons will take you into a little deeper dive. Below that, we've also presented the four-year graduation cohort for the last several years. So you will see graduation rate data at the school district and state level for 2015, 2016, 2017, and finally 2018. And if you scroll on down, you will see the change. We have an additional field which will give you your school graduation rate as well as the change from the preceding years. So additional information presented there in chart format.
The next indicator is the one that is a new indicator that's required by the federal government, and it's an indicator of school quality. So the metric that's being used is measuring how engaged our students are in their school, and student engagement levels are determined by an advanced ed survey that was given to students in grades 3 through 12 at each grade level last year. So this was procured by the Department of Ed to really measure how engaged are students in school. If students are not engaged, the research shows they drop out, they get their grades suffer, the behaviors become a problem. So this is an advanced ed tool that was developed to try to start measuring that. It's used in a couple other states as well to measure school quality. So the students who are enrolled in the schools on the 90th day and through the last day of the survey, which is administered in May, will be counted in this metric. I've got to be, the rollout was the first year of it last year, so we had some challenges in rolling it out and making sure all the schools participated. So some of the participation rates were not as good as we would like, and we're going to show you that. So this is an important metric. It counts 10 points at the elementary middle level and 5 at the high school. So we're going to go through that. Also on this part of the report card that I want to really emphasize, at the elementary and middle schools and at the high schools, we're going to be reporting chronic absenteeism. That's an important indicator that the feds have required us to put on the report cards, and it's an indicator that I, as a school board member, would be looking at in my individual schools. If children are absent, they do not learn. So what is causing that chronic absenteeism in my schools? I would start looking at that indicator as one of the prime indicators to look at as a precursory to their assessment results. The state of Oregon recently did a study, and chronic absenteeism was the #1 indicator of graduation. So if the students miss out, they don't earn the credits, they get frustrated, behavior, and they leave. So looking at that. Also, you'll have some other things on there like your technology in your schools. This is where we will report that information on the availability of technology in your school. So the initial review that we had of the participation in the survey, we had 47 schools that had no students to complete the survey, and 54 that had fewer than 20. 94 had a response rate of less than 50%. So we knew we had some schools that had very low participation. The mean response rate was very good in the state, 85.6%, and the median, meaning half had higher and half had lower, was almost 94%. So we had good participation rate from a great number of schools. So how did we in this first year take that into account? We took into account a participation rate of 85%. To get full points for this metric, you had to have a participation rate of at least 85%. And then the points are earned based on the average of all the students identified as committed among the domains, the cognitive, behavioral, and emotional. So what percentage of my students were engaged in learning at my school, committed, engaged? That's how schools receive points. Again, the schools are rated from top to bottom, but the highest committed schools will get the most points, the lowest committed the least. That's how we're going to set the cut points. We didn't have any other data to be able to know what is a good commitment. Is a good commitment 70% of my kids are committed or 50? So we're just going to take the schools and just do a rating, a percentile ranking of all of our schools, and that's how they'll earn points.
As far as the report card, this will present the total points earned, or the total engagement of all the students along all three of the domains we measure. And then you'll see the engagement level by each of the domains. So at the cognitive level, are students cognitively engaged in school, behaviorally and emotionally engaged in school. We're also presenting the participation rates so that schools and districts and you will know what the participation rate is. Melanie indicated overall it was fairly high, but we did have some districts or some schools specifically that had pretty low participation rates. We're going to be working on that and providing guidance as we go forward into the future. One of the things that we're also doing at the department is we have brought on an additional staff member to help work with districts to dive into these data and determine, well, what do these data mean and how can these data inform the work that we're doing. So we will be offering some additional support in this area as we go forward and learn more about student engagement in our schools. Again, as with the other indicators, you will see at the bottom in a chart format the additional data elements that Melanie pointed out. So the percentage of students in gifted and talented, technology kinds of data, and all of those points as well.
All right, on classroom environment, this indicator will not receive a rating. No ratings, but the data are important and have been collected over time that policymakers, and I hope you as school board members, have really looked at is information about the teachers, because as we know, there's a lot of issues in our state with teacher shortages. So the data reported on here are to highlight what's important which is the most important factor in a child's success in your school, the teacher. So to include things like the student-teacher ratios, number of teachers, teacher attendance, teacher turnover rates. That's a really critical factor. Average teacher salary, percentage of teachers with advanced degrees, to really focus in on data that matter in the classroom. And again, as a school board member, if you have other data that you would like to know more about in the classroom, that's data that we could also put on this part of the report card.
These data will be presented in a chart format so that you will be able to see what your specific schools, the data, the percentage or the number, whatever the particular metric or the point that we're putting here. You'll also see how has the change from the preceding year. So have we gone up? Have we gone down as well? So we will have that information presented on this particular page in a chart format. Again, as Melanie said, this is not rated, so on this, at the top right, you will not see a rating or a point assigned to this, but the information is presented as information.
So, John, we got a question on the participation on the surveys, which I think is a great question. What can we do as board members to get higher participation on the student surveys?
That's a great question. I would certainly say my recommendation would be to work very closely with your schools to make sure that that they're addressing and making sure that students are completing it. As Melanie said, we encountered a number of challenges this first year, which is not terribly unusual, but we're going to be working very closely with the vendor to address those challenges going forward. But certainly encouraging your schools to make sure that all students in grades 3 through 12 are completing the survey within the time frame. It's important to share, too, with parents the importance of students responding to these surveys. Lots of times a 9th grader or 10th grader may just want to click through a survey, but just helping them understand it's really important for us to know what they think about school, because we want students to feel like they belong in school. So the information is very important to us, and we want students and schools to take it seriously, because we want to learn how to better engage students as they progress through our school system.
Yeah, and I'm going to emphasize what John said. Remember, it's all students. So an accountability system can bring out the best of behaviors and the worst of behaviors. So as far as making sure that all students in that school are given the survey, not just the students that are doing well and are engaged and are happy, but especially those students who are not engaged, or those students who typically end up at the principal's office a lot. with behavioral issues. Those are the students that we really need to get their results on this to know what can we do to change the climate of our schools. So if I were a school board member, I would really want to know the participation rates and ask that question, comparing it to last year to this year, and you want to see all students, unless they were absent for a long time period during that survey, as many students as are at that school that are enrolled, special ed, English language learners, all students need to be taking that survey. And then that data that you can look at as a school board member to decide there's something going on positively here with the school environment or negatively, and then we need to address it as a community.
Absolutely. And I will add that one of the challenges that we experienced this first year of administration was surveying students with disabilities. So we are working very closely with a vendor to make sure that this upcoming year we have better guidance and better resources in place for schools to administer this survey to their students with disabilities.
Great question. This next one is student safety, and I'm going to tell school board members right now this will be the first link that parents go to. When that report card comes out, achievement is important, but as a parent, it's student safety #1 on their minds right now. In the focus groups that the EOC did with parents on the report cards, they insisted this was the most important thing in their minds. How safe are my children when they're at school? I want you to know up front that we are limited in this next report card on what can be displayed under student survey. So per a directive of the Office of Civil Rights, on every state's report cards, the 2015-16 data must be documented that shows out-of-school suspensions, expulsions, schools-related arrests, etc. This is old data. Hands up, this is old data that's going to be on the report card, but again, it's a federal directive. What I would tell school board members as well as superintendents is get ready for when this data are released, and you need to start telling your story of what student safety is like today in your schools. Data that you are seeing, things that you've done to improve student safety on your campuses. School board members need to start writing that narrative now, because again, when these are released, as John's going to show you, you're going to have to start answering to this issue about student safety. So you're going to also see on this report card the results of the student, teacher, and parent surveys dealing with school safety. My child feels safe at school. That kind of data is also going to be on here. So we're trying to show both what is federally required as well as data that we're collecting off our parent, teacher, and student surveys.
So how does this look? It looks very similar to other of our metrics that are provided as information but not rated. It's presented in chart format. At the very top of the page, you will see the information from the student, parent, and teacher survey about evaluation specifically from parents as well as teachers in terms of safety. So what were those parents and teachers reporting as far as feeling safe, either themselves as teachers or their children at school? Below that, in a chart format, you will see the OCR required data elements reported out. So the number of, as examples, robberies with weapons, all of those things that districts are required to report are presented here. Now, again, it's important to underline that these data will be from the 2015-16 data collection submitted by the school to the Office of Civil Rights.
And finally, financial information will be on the report card. This is the first year of the data that will be, it's a moving, it's a moving report card data on the financial information. We're going to have as much as we can on measures like per pupil expenditures, expenditures for instruction, poverty index, which I think is a very important indicator to have on the ratings, as well as hovers over a lot of these terms so that parents can and the public can understand what these indicators mean. So the feds are requiring, it'll be starting next report card if I'm not mistaken, much more detail on the financial status of schools, including breakdowns by federal, state, and local monies. So the department is working on that. I know John can talk more about that, about the data systems to collect that. But please know, financial information, again, for the first time under EFSA, states have to make that accountable and transparent for the public.
And so we are continuing to work on our data systems for collecting and reporting these data. These data will also be presented excuse me, in a chart format for both the amounts of money that are expended. We will be reporting the local, state, and federal money. We'll be reporting out the amount of that money that's going for instruction, for teacher salary, and the like. This is a continuing process that we're working to make sure that we're collecting good data and have easy ways of reporting this information to school districts, but it will be included on this very first report card. Melanie mentioned a good point I just wanted to underline too, is that we will on the report card have a number of hovers. So if you take your mouse and you hover it over specific areas, it will give you little pop-ups that will give you additional details or more information in what we hope to be parent-friendly language to understand what all of these different parts and pieces are. As we've gone through this, one of the things that we've noted is we have the information that's presented to use in our ratings, but again, we're presenting a lot of information that's just used it's not used for our rating, but instead used just for information. And you see some of these examples. Again, these are required components from either the federal law or state law, but they will be presented as information. We're very pleased in terms of preparing some online resources. So we will have a state webpage. If you visit www.ed.sc.gov, there will be a report card page that will contain the accountability link, which became live as of September the 5th. We will also have a link there to historical report cards. We will have a link to the school and district report card portal, the screenshots that you've seen this morning. We'll also have embedded reports and other documents, as well as information on our accountability system. Additional resources, we have the school and district report card portal where you can go and look at your specific school and districts. You can do some comparisons. I'll let Melanie talk about expectmoresc.com. And then lastly, we have worked to produce an accountability metric statutory kind of document that says here's the metric that's on the report card and where in either state or federal law is it required.
Thanks, John. So expectmoresc.com is a website that the EOC has produced over the past 6 to 9 months. It's going to go live on November 15th when the report cards go live. We have found that it's very important that we retell the story of why public education matters. And I know that's a sad commentary on our country and on our society right now, but there's a lot of misconceptions about how important education is and how important educational attainment for our students, for all our students, is to the state. So we are retelling that story in this website to raise the expectations of our state regarding public education. It's almost we're going to tell the story of why it matters to children's lives, why it matters to communities, why it matters to social welfare programs, why it matters to the economic future of our state. We need 60% of our working age adults by 2025 to have a post-secondary degree or industry credential. That's what the jobs that are already here and being built for our citizens need. Right now in our state, we're at 42%. We've got a long way to go. But the only way we're going to get there is to improve the outcomes for students, and that it takes not just you as school board members or teachers, it takes the whole state. So on that report, on this website, we're going to have links for information that the business community, community leaders, parents can take to help their students, help their schools improve. We've got some real tangible suggestions, and I think you as school board members would love some of the suggestions because we tie in the role of school board members to the whole community as a whole, how to gain more engagement from the community and parents in helping students learn. Again, it's called expectmoresc.com. I just learned last week that expectmorearizona.com was released last week. So it's a theme that's running throughout our nation. It's time that we are raising the bar, and I think that's what we're going to see on the report cards. Some of the ratings are not going to be what you may have expected your schools to earn, both better or worse. But the bar has been raised. It's no longer important. It's no longer sufficient just to get a high school diploma. We've raised the bar. Students need to be ready for college and careers immediately when they leave. So the bar is raised, especially since the Great Recession and the technology revolution of the past decade. So things are changing. So Expect More SC will hopefully give some resources to give you support and your schools and your community. And then finally, you have on your screen a guide to the 2018 South Carolina School Report Cards that the EOC published. We have copies of this. If you would like copies for your school board, please let us know. Call our office, and I've got the link at the end. It is written in terms that lay people can understand the report cards. It's 13 pages of taking this huge system of accountability and simplifying it into ways that hopefully the public can understand, especially parents, educators, and school board members. So we would love to provide you copies at no cost. If you would just let us know, we will ship those to you.
So where are we in the work that we're doing? To say that we have been busy is kind of an understatement, because we've been working very hard with the EOC in terms of putting all these parts and pieces together for the report card launch on November the 15th. Just for your information, where we are in September, working with the EOC, we collectively released the accountability manual. I think are working on a couple of updates that we're going to be sending as we're getting to the end and finding out what the overall ratings were going to look like. We've been finishing our report card portal and loading in the data to the system. We had opportunities to present before the South Carolina Association of School Administrators, and we had an opportunity to present in front of school district PIO or information officers back in September. This month we are working right now in the embargoed release of report cards for districts to review, so giving districts an opportunity to compare their data against the data that has been preloaded into the report card and identify if they have any concerns. And then we will compare our data sets to make sure that the data we have in the system is valid and reliable data. We've been working together, the EOC and the department, on regional meetings, targeting particularly school level leaders, principals, and the like, to go through this very similar presentation to let them know what does this accountability system look like. And then lastly, we've been having, excuse me, media presentations, conversations with the media to talk about what this new accountability system looked like, as well as beginning to look at our CSI and TSI schools. November, we're going to complete any necessary revisions to our report card, the launch of the expectmoresc.com website, and then on November the 15th, we will have the public release of the report card. Our next steps once we do that is we will continue working with those schools that are identified as having a CSI, or Comprehensive Support and Improvement, or TSI, which is the Targeted Support and Improvement, working with the EOC, identifying what are the lessons that we've learned from this process, what are the data telling us, and what are the process telling us. Working with the EOC on any edits that we may need to do for our ASSA consolidated plan. Anytime that we change our accountability plan, we have to submit an amendment request to the U.S. Department of Education for their review and approval. And then very quickly working on the 2018-19 report card platform, and as we do that, engaging stakeholders along the way. So even though the report card will be launched on the 15th, we will pretty much start the next day working on what we're doing for next year's report card.
It's an organic system. So again, we would love feedback from school board members after the release, after you've had time to look at the report cards, on what made sense, what you need more information on. I think if I were if I were in your shoes thinking about what I would look at, I think I would start looking at my kindergarten readiness assessments in my district and schools versus my third grade SC Ready scores in English and math. Maybe look at 8th grade. And then look again at how my high school seniors are doing as far as their career readiness assessments, their ACT, SAT, really starting to look at the system as a whole. That's what I really think we need to start looking at. Those pivotal grades, 3rd, 5th, and 8th, are pivotal in the system, but starting with kindergarten, because we've got to improve our kindergarten readiness. I think it was 36 or 38% of students in South Carolina were ready. That's the indicator we've got to start moving, because it's amazing then when you look at the end of the system, we're still at 36 or 38%. So we've got to improve both ends. And I think the report cards, using them as a tool to start the local conversations is what we would say. We are hoping that these first ones are the lowest we'll see, and then we're all going to see the growth going forward. That's what we're hoping for.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Thanks for having us. We enjoyed it.
Thank you.